What's going on, guys? So today we're going to be talking about, is the Canon RP still worth it with the R5 and R6 coming out? I first want to say that yes, the Canon RP is not as good as the Canon R5 or R6. It doesn't have as many features, but at the end of the day, for the price, is the Canon RP still worth it? For some people, maybe they'll pick the Canon RP up over the R5 or R6. So let's jump into my personal thoughts. I'm going to be looking at my phone because there's a lot of numbers coming up. So let's talk about it. The price of the RP is currently sitting around $1,000 or 1,200 Canadian. You also can get it for a lot cheaper than this if you look for the sales or if you look on the used market. The current price of the Canon R5 is $5,400 Canadian or $3,900 US, and that's like a massive price jump from $1,000. You can almost buy 6 RPs for that. Or the R6, which is $3,500 Canadian or $2,500 US, and for that price you can even still get 2.5 RPs or maybe even 3 if you look for those sales. Still 2 to 3 times more expensive. That's just a lot of extra money, and if you don't need all the features in, say, the R5 or R6, then you could just pick up the RP. So with all the extra money, you could, buy a couple lenses, you could buy like a drone, you could buy a GoPro, you could buy a whole travel setup if that's what you're into, and that's just mind-blowing to me, especially because if you're only shooting, say, stuff for YouTube or just photos or just you're going on a family adventure and you kind of want that travel vibe and like you're making family films, then you don't really want to invest that much money. Like, that's a crazy amount of money. If all you're doing is taking photos and you're not too concerned about the video aspect of things and your main focus is megapixels, so the Canon RP is 26 megapixels with 5 frames a second. The Canon R5, which is a heavy megapixel boost, which is 45 megapixels at 20 frames a second, or the R6, which is 20 megapixels at 20 frames per second. In my personal opinion, like 20 frames a second is mind-blowing. Like, that's super fast, and I don't know what you'd be shooting unless you're shooting sports or like crazy action. I don't know what you'd be doing with 20 frames per second. One of the big upsides of the Canon RP is it's such a tiny camera. Like, even though it's not that much smaller than the Canon R, and the Canon R is not that much smaller than the R5 and R6, but I will say that the smaller the camera, the more inconspicuous you can be, especially if you are using it with the 35 1.8 lens, that it's just super tiny setup, and it can like go in a bag. It could almost fit in your pocket. I don't know what kind of pockets you have. Maybe if you had like some cargo shorts or something, you could take the lens off and like slide the lens in one pocket, camera in the other pocket, and you can get that camera into a lot more places that you wouldn't be able to get like an R5 or R6 with like a 15 to 35 millimeter lens on it. That's one of the upsides, as well as obviously the Canon colors, so you can match it with cinema cameras and whatnot like that. If you do shoot a lot of video, then I would honestly almost skip the Canon RP because the 4K is cropped. It's not the greatest. It doesn't have Canon log, which is currently what I'm shooting this on right now. The R5 has like 4K, 8K raw recording, same with the R6. So if video is your future and that's what you mainly want to prioritize, then I would honestly skip the RP because it's kind of outdated now, in the sense of it only shoots 1080, like full 1080 at 24 and 60 frames a second, which in my opinion is kind of outdated, especially with the 4K being the new standard. Unless this camera is good, if you just want to beat it up and you don't really care, like $800 is a lot less of a risk than $5,400 or like $4,000 or anything like that. Like, you will put the Canon RP in more dangerous situations than the Canon R5, in my opinion. Personally, I love the 4K, even though it's cropped, because I like to have that extra little bit of detail, or if I'm trying to shoot something extremely far, then I do have that little bit of zoom because it's like a 1.6 crop. So it's like I have two focal ranges if I'm using a prime, and if I'm using a zoom lens, I have two different focal ranges for the whole entire range. Also, the RP does not come with IBIS built in, it just comes with the electronic stabilization and lens IS if you have a lens that has IS built in. So one of the features that I do really love, and I wish the Canon R had this feature and R5 had this feature, is the mode selector on the Canon RP and the R6. It just allows me to like slide it over and hit the menu that I really want right away, and I don't have to look at the screen, I don't have to focus on what's going on. I just know the settings that are set to the camera that I personally have my custom settings set. I have it set for video, I have it set for slow-mo, 4K, and it's just like, if I'm trying to run and gun, I can just pop it over and then be filming right away instead of me having to touch it and like focus on the screen to see if I hit it properly and got it in the right mode. So yeah, that's one of my loves for these two cameras. I honestly think the Canon RP is definitely an amazing camera still. It's the cheapest full frame camera that you can buy from Canon, especially if you can pick it up for extremely cheap, maybe just a couple $100. Maybe you're just looking for a camera to take photos of your kids, your family. Maybe you're taking photos of food or doing videos or just content creation in general. Then this camera will honestly serve all your needs, and it's not a bad camera. You don't need to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to get good images and good image quality. I honestly think that you can't beat this, especially if you can get it for like $800, $600. Like, there's no way that you can top that in my personal opinion, and this camera is definitely worth it and still has a place in Canon's lineup. Those are my thoughts on the Canon RP and if it's still worth it. And if you have any questions, leave it in the comments down below, and until the next video, peace.